on.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session on SAP HANA 2.0 SPS 7, what is new in modeling and development. I'm Jan Zwickel from the SAP HANA product management team, and with me, Volker Saggau. Volker, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jan. My name is Volker Saggau, even member of the part of the HANA product management team. And today we want to introduce you to modeling and development, what's new in HANA 2 SPS 7. And Jan starts with his content.
Okay, thanks, Volker. So the content that I'm talking about is calculation view modeling. I mean, first of all, the usual disclaimer that you hopefully read then in your leisure time to see what we disclaim here. And other than that, let's start with the features. So if we look at calculation views, we have introduced a couple of new features, and I would like to share first of all the individual features on a slide with you, and afterwards show it also in a system in a demo. So the first feature that I want to talk about is calculation view snapshots. And the idea of calculation view snapshots is that at a certain point in time, you take a query from your calculation view and you store this query in a database table. So you define a snapshot query and put the snapshot query in a table. Now, what we offer with this feature is that you define the query in your calculation view. And if you do so and you deploy your calculation view, then we offer some procedures that help you to manage the snapshots. So then there will be a procedure for inserting the data based on the query into the snapshot table, to truncate the snapshot table, and so on. So this gives you an opportunity now to define certain queries that should be run on a database, on a calculation view, and materialize the results there. That can be helpful in a context where the calculation is very resource intensive, and you want to not calculate the results every time, but you just want but you are fine also with having a little bit outdated data. So you could have, for example, a snapshot taken every morning, then report only on the snapshot data, and then on the next day you get the new snapshot and report on the new data there. If this is acceptable, that the data is a little bit outdated, then this can be an option to save some resources and also speed up your queries. Of course, you can also use this feature if you want to do something like a cumulative storage, that you want to take a snapshot of what's in your store every day, and you want to keep the data over the time. So there's two aspects to it. One is the resource management, and the other one is about storing or materializing a view of a table. Now, the second feature is about session user masking, and this is relevant in the context of column masking. We introduce column masking, which allows you to mask certain columns. And so, for example, you can define an expression that is displayed instead. So instead of displaying, for example, an account number, you display only the last 3 digits or something like that. Now, whether you see the unmasked or masked values depends on your privileges of a user. In the past, this user was always the calling user, which meant if you had a stacked calculation view scenario, so you had a calculation view that consumed another calculation view, this led to the situation that the calling user was the calculation view actually, which meant it was a technical user, which meant if you had a stacked calculation scenario, either you saw whether you saw the data or not did not depend on the user who queried the calculation view, but depended on the last caller, which was in this case a calculation view, and therefore the object owner of the HDI container. Now with this new feature, you have the option to choose what you want, whether you want to have the calling user as in the past, or whether you want to use the session user. If you select under semantics and general the mask mode session user, then the session user is checked, which means if I run a query, my privileges are checked and I see the columns either unmasked or masked depending on my own privileges. Then we introduce temporal tables. Temporal tables is a way of managing data that has a time dependency. there are different flavors to it. There are system version tables, there are application time tables, and also temporal tables, which combine system version and application time. The idea of system version tables is that more or less automatically, if you insert a record, data is stored when the insert happened. For application time, you specify explicitly the validity period of the records. The important point is that with this information, so it's a special type of tables, if you use this special type of tables, then your query can automatically make use of date information to select which records should be visible. We support that now also in calculation views, where you can define system version and application time periods or dates that you want to check if you have a data source that supports these type of temporal tables. If you have a data source that uses these temporal tables. So to make it a little bit more concrete, here, for example, we have a data source that that is based on a system version table, so and actually also an application version period table. So you have the option now, if you click on this source, to define system time and application time for this data source. So then that the filtering is done based on this setting. We also introduced procedures that fill timetables. In the past, if you wanted to fill timetables, you could use the user interface, which had the downside that if you worked in a productive system where you didn't want to connect the development environment to it, or if you wanted to do a regular update, it was a little bit cumbersome. Now we offer, as a complementary solution, a procedure which you can call and fill the system tables, timetables with that. So what are these tables used for? If you look at one example here, you see there's a certain mapping between different time formats. So that, for example, if you want to map from a date SAP to a year or month and so on, you can use this table to do this mapping. It also offers you the option to select all dates that are, for example, in a special week, so that if you do a join, you can join on each day of a certain week. And yeah, also if you just want to know, for example, what weekday was a certain date, then you can also determine that with this table. And as said, if you want to fill these tables, then you can use now also a function or a procedure, so you don't have to use the user interface of Web IDE for filling these tables anymore. So as a complementary option to fill it. Then we allow now also comments and expressions. So if you want to document why you use a certain expression, what's the meaning behind it, you can use comments now. One style of comments is the /* style, and the other one is the --/ comment. We also offer now median aggregation. So median aggregation is statistically an option to have a more robust statistic against outliers. So if you suspect outliers in a data, then using the median aggregation can make your calculations more stable. I mean, here's an extreme example. We have here a lot of apples, and we have one outlier here for apple and one for banana. And if you look on the amount, if you take just the average, you follow the outlier, so you have a totally distorted average. If you use the median, then you are much less distorted, and you end up with a reasonable amount for the non-outlying data. With that, I'm finished with the slides and would move over to the demo part. So we are here in SAP Web IDE. Perhaps first some words on how you can follow these examples yourself. There is a blog post where new modeling features are discussed. So we have here the new modeling features for SAP HANA Cloud, but we also have here a link for SPS 7. So we have on the one hand side a link to a blog which describe project where you can get a have here also in your environment. Now let's have a look at the examples. The first example was about the comments in expressions. So if I open here the calculation view, and here it's in the expression. So I just have to rearrange my window a little bit because I changed the screen resolution to make it better visible. And this now makes my screen a little bit smaller because I have a very wide screen. So here you see the example of the comments in the expression. So you can just tell what is meant here, and you can successfully deploy it because the commands don't throw an error. So you can now use the commands in your expressions. The other example is about the timetables, where I talked about, by the way, in the project, you have also then an info file where you can then in Markdown language see examples and a little bit more explanation. And this is what I'm just now taking from a statement. So here's a call statement for filling the tables. So let's just execute that in a database explorer. So I connect here with a system user so that I can create a schema, because I want to create a schema called time data. And now I call the procedure. I want to fill it on granularity level of days. I want to fill it from 2018 to 2025. I do it in the schema time data, and I call it date granularity 2018 to 2025. So let's just execute it. Oh. Okay, then the schema already exists. That's a little bit strange, but okay, I can still just use another schema, and you see 2,925 objects are created, and now I can do a select on the table. So you see now the data which is entered by it. So you have now an easy method to fill these tables with a procedure. Then about the median aggregation, if you go into the calculation view and you look here, you have here now the option to select also median from the aggregation type, and then the median aggregation is taken when you do the calculation. For the session user masking, we have here, let me close that to clean it a little bit up. We have here a mask calculation view, which has a masking definition. So it's a very simple definition. So if you look here, it's just left of the account number. And now if I do a data, and I have wrapped this calculation view now in another calculation view, which is this wrapper calculation view, just to demonstrate the difference between the session user and the non-session user. So if I do now a data preview, I see the data unmasked. And the reason is that I have assigned here in the development debug role the unmask privilege, which means the runtime user, which is doing the data preview here, has the privilege to unmask. Now I can also take away this privilege and build it. And now if I do the data preview, the data is masked. So what this should illustrate is that depending on the privileges of the calling user, you see the data masked or unmasked. So I could, of course, use also another database user and just assign the relevant privileges. Now, the difference is if in the mask column view, you would have not the setting of session user, but of the calling user. And I just built that again after changing it back, changing it to the default. Now the calling user will be the user of the wrapper masked, which means the object owner will be checked, and the object owner has the unmasked privilege, so I will always see the data unmasked. And this is why it's important to decide now whether which masking mode you want to use in your view. Now, the next example is about snapshots. Here we have a calculation view, a very simple calculation view just for the sake of the demo. And if you go to the semantics and view properties and snapshots, you have here the option to add multiple snapshots. Here's one example query. So if you click on it, you see the default query that would also be shown if you did a data preview, and you can now change it. For example, I want to add a timestamp to it so that it's easier now for the demo to see what is happening. And with that, I have now defined the snapshot query. So let's save it and build the view. And if I go now to Database Explorer, and I go to let's first look at the tables. You see now that there's a snapshot table generated with a name, following the naming convention of the snapshot of the calculation view called CVSnap. So I get a snapshot table CVSnap query 1 because that's the query name, which of course I could also change, and then snap and snapshot, which is the table. So if I do a data preview here, I see already data inserted. The reason is that I have selected here the option create snapshot after deployment automatically. So because of that, when I deploy, the snapshot is this query data is already inserted into the snapshot table. What you can also see here is if I go to procedures, that certain procedures are automatically generated and they manage these snapshots. So you have a procedure for create, drop, insert, and truncate the snapshot table. Now, you probably don't want to manually insert the snapshots every day. So there are options to schedule it. I mean, in the end, you just call an insert procedure. So you could either do it here by right-clicking on insert and say generate call statement. And then you can enter here. Here's an input parameter actually required. So I can, for example, enter US. And now the snapshot is entered. So I should see here now another US entry at the timestamp 19 after. Now, also, this is probably not what you want. I mean, this is something where how you can schedule your inserts by many tools. One option that you also have, meanwhile, is that in the HDI container, you can also enter a scheduler. So let's say we have a scheduler job here, which says that the snapshot should be filled every minute at 45 seconds. It's calling the procedure with the parameter US. So if I now rename that so that I take away the txt, so that it's a regular design time file, and I deploy it, then the job will be scheduled. And at the moment now, or from now on, it would run every minute at 45 seconds and insert the data. Let's just check that for a moment. One option to check it is we can, for example, look at the at the monitoring views. So if you look here at job scheduler, you see the inserts that one is scheduled. There has been some successful inserts in the past because I tested this before. And you see also here in the scheduler job that now one process is active. Which means now if I go back to my snapshot table, I will see every minute that there's a new, you see here 45, a new entry is done in the snapshot table. I turn it off now so that it's not getting too many inserts if I forget it. So I just rename it back, and or you can also of course delete the file, and then I build the folder that contains it, and then the job is undeployed. So if I go now here and select it, it's gone. Okay, then the last feature that I want to talk about is about temporal tables. And I will focus here on application time because it's a little bit, I mean, system version time. Versioning is, as I said, controlled by the system insert, which means if I insert now, I would get the timestamps of the insert now. So it's a little bit hard to demo it because you just have very small differences in the timestamps. So I take the application time here. But first, let's have a look at the UI, how it looks like, how you use it. So let's open a calculation view. The first thing that you could notice is that here's now an indicator that there are temporal sources used. That's important because the temporal sources can change over time. Let's say you take a filter of current date, then because of the temporal sources, it might change every day what you see. And so that this is a little bit more transparent or more obvious what is happening in the view, we have an indicator that the temporal source is used here, meaning there might be differences depending on the date or time when you query the view. Now in the aggregation, if you go to the mapping and click on the source, you have here, if it's a temporal source, you have here an option. If this is a temporal source, so either system version time or application period time data source, then you can select here the temporal source option, which then offers you the different options. This is the application time source, so you can have only the option to change the application time here. So here, as in this example, it's about an input parameter. So the application time will be set to this input parameter value, which means it will filter based on the input parameter value. I could also have a literal there, or function as well. You can change it here by using the expression editor. So nothing special here. Here you see, by the way, how the application time tables are defined. There's a special design time file for it. Okay. Now you might have multiple table data sources in your calculation view, and this makes it perhaps at some point a little bit confusing if you have different temporal data source specifications. I mean, it could be wanted, but perhaps sometimes at some point you want to have a consistent timestamp for all your temporal data sources. If you want to achieve something like that, then you can go to view properties. And here is then are 3 entries where you can enter your start time for system time, the end time for system time, or for application time. And if you click here the apply button, then whatever you enter here will be applied to all temporal data sources in the current calculation view, which means this is an option to make a consistent setting for your temporal sources. Now let's have a very quick look at an example. So I take the insert statements here. Okay, and I have a network connection. I was afraid because I got a warning that my network connection is not so good. Okay, but it's back. So I insert the data. Okay, so I insert the data. And what you see is that if I now query for current date, I will not have an overlap between these dates here, but only with the later dates. Now let's just do the query on the calculation view. So let's do first the query on the data itself. So I do a data preview on the table. And you see, I see all the 5 inserted records. Now, if I do a data preview of the view itself, so where the temporal sources are treated with the settings, here I'm asked now for the input parameter because the default value of the input parameter is the current date. I get this value already. And if I execute it, then I see only 3 records, the ones that are overlapping with the selected temporal setting. And with that, I'm finished with my demo and hand over to Volker.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Jan, for this impressive demo. And you took already ahead some of the stuff I want to show, but that's good. I don't have to do it then, particularly the job scheduler. So we have 4 areas where I go through. We have the XSA environment, we have the HDI environment. I will briefly talk also about Database Explorer. And finally about BAS, which is a little bit astonishing here, but you will see. So the very first thing is we spend a lot of effort in getting up latest versions or updated versions of various runtime environments. So we came to NodeJS 18 and be aware that we have a stop of NodeJS 14. I'm coming to that later. We have the latest Java submachine. We have the latest Tomcat 9 version here. And we upgraded SAP UI 5. Very deep thanks to the development team here. They put a lot of effort to get this into the XSA stack as well. So you are now able to work with your Launchpad and other things from XSA side on. So NodeJS 18, that's, if we look at the scheduling, we have, you see 14 is running out in April, even 16 is running out, 18 is the version to at least come to 2025. And in the course of the next versions, we will see where we end up with the next versions of Node.js, but we will keep it up to date so that you don't lose the connectivity to the market. There is a problem with Node.js, XSJS, which started already in Node.js 14, and that is that we have incompatibilities with XSJS, and you have certain problems there. You have to replace your XSJS code to asynchronous XSJS, and you have to refactor your code. You have to go through that. I know it's not nice, but it's depending on the nodes version, which we cannot change on that spot. So be aware of this. If you still have XSJS, you have to upgrade. And you have to follow the ideas. Mainly the node is important here. There are more informations in the help as well. So look at this if you are still with XSJS code. The JDK 17 is coming up. Just if you look at the homepage from our submachine, you will see that we are still massively contributing to this, as well as others, of course, Oracle first. And we maintain this and bring you up to this release in SP7. Tom EE9, same thing. We implemented that version, so relevant information you can find on the homepage from Tom EE. We just get things in. Here again, life cycle Tom EE will also last until the 20. Where are we? Will be 10 years. That's typically that. So we will be by 27. So that's also something we can live with for the next years, and then we will see how we continue that one. Stop. Go here. Next one, UI5 again. We are now with long-term support for UI5 in the stack here. So we are again here Q4 2027. And compatibility, so your work on UI5 fits into the SAP world. Then we are looking for deployment options, and I put in here 4 things. So the long-awaited, at least from some people, is the DML support in migration tables. We have a new option called try fast table. I explain that later. Stop on error is already a time there, but it was not published for publicly announced for SPs for HANA on-premise. And as you have seen, the scheduler job, which Jan already showed. So you can now in migration table have support for DML, data manipulation language, in the form of update, and you can, while you have for example a denormalization, you want to put 2 fields together, or you want to extract 2 fields where they have in 1 field and want to put it to 2 fields. So now you have the capability to change the content of the table while you're deploying. So if we look at this, and here is a sample, the migration table always has the concept of a version. So you have the first version which you deploy, then you have a migration. In this case, you have a person here with first name, last name. In the second version, so that was the very first version, and then I now made the third version. Migration 2 to version 2 was adding a street, adding a city, and renaming name to last name. And ultimately, we alter street from character 100 to 200 and doing this. Now, you want to kind of go further and want to shrink down your character length here. So what you can do now is a kind of changing things. So what you do is you insert in migration for a new street. Therefore, you have to make space in the old street. So we rename this street to street 2. We will add a street with 150, and then we do an update with left. So database is cutting the content of street 2 to 150, and ultimately we drop the column here. So by this kind of shade, what we are doing here is we are able to downgrade the length of a field, which was very cumbersome until now. So hope you like this feature and you use it. First time we have DML inside migration table. Now to the second one, we have try fast table migration now. People who worked with very large tables and have used HDB table construct we're realizing that we are doing under the hood a very expensive operation. We copied the whole content into a new table, which was a very safe method, but it was also a very expensive method for large tables because it took time and it took resources. Now we are able to find out compatible changes and will apply alter statements on HDB tables. So with this option on, we will at least try to do this. If you're using BAS in a few weeks, it will be automatically enabled inside the environment, and we will allow you to do hopefully much faster changes of HDB table, because we just alter a lot of things rather than copying massive amounts. So you're saving time, you're saving resources, and I hope you like this feature as well. So if you do this, this is a summary here. You will get an alter table here for birthday rather than having, and this is a little bit of pseudocode here. This is the way we did it before, kind of. And you see, this is because we have an insert operation here. This is so much more expensive that you rather would like to have this way. And this is a compatible change because we just add a new column. If you have a default column, so not null column, you should add a mandatory column. You should add a default value. Then it's again compatible, and you can go ahead. So stop on error is another feature which is there. So we will spread we will continue to deploy while we found the first error. But since this is a graph, the deployment tree is a graph, and we will see where we have when we come to one end, we can still continue in the other cases. So you will see not only the first error, but you will see all errors which are caused by whatever wrong typing or other things. So it's easier with less cycles to find errors while you're developing. Again, a parameter. This will be default in the future in BAS. Job scheduler is something which is in HANA since quite a while, but we haven't made it to HDI so far. And Jan showed a very nice sample where you have snapshots inside a calculation view. You might have ETL jobs inside HDI. And if you see HDI as a self-containing environment, you can use these things, and it would be much more cumbersome to control things from outside. Yes, there is a scheduling in BTP, but just to do the snapshot would be extremely expensive to do that from outside. So this is a very nice sample how you can use job scheduler inside. And I just made a little bit the graph here of the syntax of the job scheduler. So you typically have a create scheduler. You put in the cron notation here, and then you can define from when to when it's running, whether it should run a particular start procedure for this, and when you want to provide parameters for that. So as a simple sample, the HDB scheduler job is always without the create in the beginning of the standard SQL. So it's scheduler job retention, and then you saw the notation from Jan where he just had the seconds. In my case, I'm doing that from Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at every hour, and at 1 o'clock 23:45. So that's how you use this notation. And yeah, so this is the way you can use this. Hope this is also helping you. Now to another section, which is the Database Explorer, and Jan showed that a little bit. No, he didn't show it. No, sorry, but I will show it to you. And therefore, I'm going into the Database Explorer plugin from Visual Studio Code. So this is available in Visual Studio Code, and it is available in the BAS environment, which is basically also a cloud version of Visual Studio Code. So let's have a look into that. Just go out here. So there is a plugin here called Database Explorer, SAP HANA Database Explorer, and you can find that inside the Microsoft universe of plugins. You can download that and can use that inside your environment. So what we are doing here is you can, obviously, when you have CF Cloud Foundry connected, you can even see the world in the cloud, but you can also look at your databases which are locally. So I have defined here 2 databases. I have on the same machine, we have installed an SP6 version and an SP7 version with different users, here with system, here with myself. So I'll just have to clean up a little bit here my screen. Hang on a moment. So what you can do is you can do a select from M database. If you do that, I can just issue that again. You will see I'm here on version 62. And if I'm going to go on the other, just have to clean up here. Go on the other database, you will see that I'm on 7 here. So I'm working against 2 databases, and what I have done here is I just uploaded one. If I put some of the famous HANA statements from Mr. Fraundorfer here. So I have the host overview, for example, or statistics or whatever, the mini checks, whatever you can upload these statements directly here. So I've extracted them and I've prepared some of those. If I'm taking that, which is the, I have the same problem. So you see it's doing this here. Let's see where our HANA is running on system overview. There will be only one line back, and you will see our database is running on virtual hardware, running on Google. Quite a big machine here for us. Nice to work on. So we have this environment here. We have the capabilities to analyze SQL. You can save your statements. You can build a statement collection here. And when you look into the database, you can look at what tables you have here and so on. So nothing here. There are filters here, so I have to see only my own database here, and I can go to whatever system. There's system. Let's see what system has. And you will see other databases, other tables here as well. So everything you want to have, various results here coming on, messages, all nice to see. And with that, I stop this demo here and go back to my presentation. So this is the use of Database Explorer for Visual Studio Code within BAS or within Visual Studio Code. Select data from chosen tables. I have done this already. So, and now something which is not particular SP07 or SPS 07, but looking a little bit ahead of our infrastructure we are providing in the upcoming month, and this is planned for end of Q2 in this year. So, sorry, wrong direction. So what we will add to the BAS environment is the capability to develop for HANA 2 on XSA. Means now you can use BAS and say, I want to work with a HANA on-premise. So for people who are working in both environments, you get now the same tools, the same methods, you get the same results, and cross-utilization is much easier. Data remains on-premise, runtime remains on-premise. It's just that your design time objects are now in the BAS environment, and it's also, I think, easier from that also to use the Git environment. And you can convert your Web IDE stuff easily and can co-work as well with Web IDE content. Web IDE will stay. This is an additional offering. So what you have to do is you have to use a cloud connector, which is coming with each HANA Cloud anyhow. There's also a particular configuration where you can have an additional cloud connector, so you don't need to have a HANA, but you have to have these two products, and you then be able to tunnel your access into the BTP cloud and configure to work with BAS from that point on. So when you now go to the templates in BAS, you will see, apart from the HANA Cloud and HANA Service, also the HANA 2 as an option. And you can then go to your XS spaces, which are similar to the CF spaces, but they are, as said, on premise. You can create your HDI containers on the database. You can build the calculation view as Jan just shown, and you can deploy, and you will see here. So you have your tars you're deploying here, XS deploy. And you can do all this. So I just eliminated some text which is not for the public, but now you have the complete environment on your hands to do both HANA on-premise and HANA Cloud. And ultimately, you can see here your HDI containers or your user-provided services if you have these. So with that, we are finished on this side. And if there are any questions open, I haven't seen anything in the chat yet, but I'm stopping my presentation. Hang on. Stop to share.
If there are no questions, I guess there are currently none. I could offer to talk a little bit more about snapshots if there's an interest, because I was a little bit quick before because of time reasons, and I could also show there an additional option that we have there. So Volker, anything to add from your side, or otherwise I just...
No, go ahead, please.
Okay,
sure.
And I just take over again. So we are again now in Web IDE, and we have a snapshot, the snapshot calculation view that we had before. And the additional option that I wanted to show you now is that if you have a query, there is an option to generate an interface view. So you can name it by default. It has the same name as the calculation view, or it has an I as for interface, and then the calculation view name, and then the query name. And if you click on deploy, the calculation view will be generated here, and it will also be deployed. And the idea here is that it gives you an easy means to switch between the snapshot table and the calculation view directly. So what happens here is that you have a union. In this union, we do a constant pruning, meaning that you have an input parameter, and depending on the input parameter that you use, you see either data from the base table or from the base calculation view, so the online data, or you see the snapshot. So if I do now here a data preview, and I take the snapshot visibility, then I see here the data as it was entered in the snapshot. And if I do the same here, but choose the base view, then I see now the live data as it comes from the view. So here you see now there are no, there's neither the timestamp nor any additional entries. Now, just as a remark, it's easy to switch here between the calculation view online data and the snapshot, but of course that also requires certain deeper thoughts about what it means. Because if you take a snapshot, of course you will have outdated data in a certain sense, because it's just the data of the last snapshot. So it might not fit to the expectations of the calling user. So you have to make sure that if you switch between current data and snapshot data, that this is acceptable for the users and it's understood by the users that the data can differ because of the time when they were taken. And also you have to be clear about that if you take a snapshot, it's a snapshot, which means you have the granularity of the data as it is in a snapshot table, which means that it can change if you do some further aggregations, that first you aggregate on the snapshot table granularity and only afterwards on the query aggregation. Meaning, if you only request, for example, one single attribute, you still first have the calculations as of the snapshot on all of the attributes, and then only the aggregation to the single attribute, which is different from the view result, because here you only, or you prune away the non-requested attributes and would only directly calculate on the attribute, which means this is an easy way to switch between snapshot and the view, but you should be clear about that there can be differences. Also, of course, if the snapshot is taken from a user with certain privileges, then the snapshot shows the data of these privileges, which is perhaps different from what is returned by the view, which checks the privilege of the calling user at that time. So just to be clear about this feature, you have here the option to select whether the mode of the generated procedures should be invoker or definer. And if you take the invoker mode, it means if you call the insert procedure, the data will be inserted as it is visible to the one who is calling the insert procedure. If you take here the definer mode, then it means the caller, it doesn't matter who calls the insert procedure. The visibility is determined by the object owner of the container, which typically can see at least all data from the container. But of course, you could also have some external sources where then the object owner perhaps doesn't have all the privileges that would be required, or all privileges. So the short version is simply, if you take the definer mode, the object owner privileges will be checked. If you take the invoker mode, the privileges will be checked of the one who's calling the insert procedure, and you will see the data that the calling user would see in the snapshot. And with that, I'm finished now also with this part of the snapshot, and then would hand over again to Volker to see whether there are perhaps new questions arose, or whether we should finish the call earlier.
Yeah, I see one question coming, if BAS will be available on premise. That's not the case. In the first wave, we will use the BAS environment in BTP. If you stress your salesman and if you make noise, we have a chance to get it on premise as well. But right now, the first wave to see how it's working, how you can handle that, it's an additional and it's a cost-based feature right now, because this is how the cloud works. You are charged by this. It's a low two-digit. It's a very low two-digit number, but it's still not on premise. We theoretically could do that on premise, but there have to be some technical things sorted out, but it's possible. But as said, currently we are looking for the cloud solution to get this done. What else? Yes, of course. We are handling two cloud. I understand that if you wanted, the question was, do you want to have a BTP account without any other thing, just for BAS? That's difficult to get through. I understand that, but I think that's more the exception than the standard. But again, then ask your sales guys to get this. We have to build up pressure there. I have to prove that we can validate this, and technically it would be possible. I think with that we are done. As always, thanks very much for your time, for your interest in HANA product and in the HANA product. And with that, we say goodbye for the next group with their news on what's new with HANA SP 07.
Thanks from my side as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, the live stream has ended.